This is part 2 of a 3-part series all about helping you with the mindset blocks we face as entrepreneurs so you can thrive. If you missed part 1, go back, listen to it. And in part 2 here, we're going to talk all about growth mindset and creating a way for you to succeed even when you feel like you're struggling a little bit. I'll see you inside. It goes back to what you were saying earlier, where it's just not the way that we've been conditioned to think, because just as you go for the A and that means you won and you'll try to avoid the F, you also kind of, you think that if I'm good at something, it doesn't really, good at means I'm efficient, I can do this well. And you don't think about, well, does it matter that I really actually enjoy it or that it drains me or not? Can you give examples? Because I just think it's interesting always hearing from the person that's already the master. What would you say is something that, and it doesn't need to be current, it could be in the past, something that you felt you were proficient at but drained you, and something you are good at with strength based, just to really give it concrete example?
Oh, absolutely. I can give you one right off the bat. So something I'm really good at, but that drains me, is organizing. And I mean this in all kinds of ways, whether in my business or I'm also I can organize a party or whatever, but I'm the coordination, having things line up and the planning it out, and I can do it. I've learned how to do it over the course of, a standard, I guess, education in the Western world where I'm from. But it drains me. I find it difficult, and it takes me longer than somebody who might be leaning more towards that. And so I try and outsource those things now, whether it's to my friends who might organize the party instead, or to someone else in my business, so I don't have to do those things, versus something that and maybe this is we're talking right now, but I can talking to people, as much as that's a broad thing, energizes me. So some people are like, what do you mean you just listen to someone so attentively for an hour and a half when you're coaching them? I'm just yeah, I get a lot out of that. I walk out of that and I have a bounce in my step, and I know that I just gained from that. And that is maybe as much as that's painting a bigger contrast. And it doesn't have to be that every time you walk away from work and you're oh my gosh, that was the best thing ever, right? But that's kind of what you're going for, paying attention. And this is often a process for a lot of people because they haven't learned to think about it this way, right? Again, they've learned to be I got the A at these things, I was told I was good at these things, and so these are the things. But to just simply pay attention actually to I'm doing a number of things, and when do I feel I actually just recharged, or I just gained energy and I just have more to give, versus I feel drained. Those are different things, and I could be on paper good at both, but they are not both my strengths. And that's an important difference that a lot of people miss a lot of people in the corporate world also miss, right? Because they're good at something, they deliver the outcome, but they come home and they're I have nothing left to give. I'm just drained.
Is there kind of any sort of way to manage that? Because some of the stuff you're good at, or that you're proficient at, like you were saying, it's a great example, organization. You're Swiss, right, Charlotte?
Swiss, yeah. Which is, it's actually really been, I was do I say Switzerland or the Western world? But Switzerland specifically, I'm very efficient and I'm very organized.
Because as I was listening, I was that makes sense. But do you feel the organization thing is great? Because for some people that is energizing, and for 100%. You, you're proficient, but it's not your area of love and deep energy. How some of the stuff you still have to do though, right? You need to have a level of organization in your business, in your life. Are there any ways to minimize the emotional drain that has? Because I think also what's really hard is when you're proficient at it, even though you don't like it, it's so hard to delegate it. It's so hard because you think, well, I still do it better than anyone else.
Then I would say that's a whole learning journey in and of itself, right? Right. Where again, a lot of entrepreneurs, once they hit a certain income level or whatever it is, where it comes into I'm not working in the business so much though, I actually don't have much life left. And so then it comes to a point where they need to be delegating, and then they're oh, but I just do it better. And it's just then it's actually, well, let's reframe that as an opportunity to teach someone, to guide someone, to invest into how to have someone else become so proficient at it, that it's your way and that it's to your standard, because of course it should be to your standard. This is your business after all. That's also you're just dragging that out for longer if you're like, oh, it's just so hard to delegate. So sorry for calling you out for that, but I'm like, that one I'm not going to let stand. But wait, now I forgot what your original question was around. I got so distracted by that. It's so difficult to delegate.
This is a constant learning lesson for that. It's the question was when you still need to do aspects of it. So let's say you're able to train someone and you're able to and they're doing mostly for you, but you still have an element in the business of it. How do you reduce the emotional drain? Delegating, of course, is a natural way to do that. And training someone else using AI, using different tools that can help you. Are there other ways, just in terms of, I don't know, like mindset maintenance or inputs that you can choose that will give you more energy to kind of counterbalance the drain there?
I actually think that, yes, absolutely. I just think they're actually less complicated than you think. Meaning, once you have a bit of an awareness, once you've maybe, audited your strengths in this way, and you can do strengths assessment, right? There's so many ways that we don't have to dive into now, but like this, I have grown an awareness of what are the types of things that energize me versus the types of things that drain me. And so then the balance is in making sure that ratio is always sort of like pro the parts that energize me, right? Like I am a realist in the sense that like there is no world where you're going to wake up happy and every day is just dandy all the time. Because again, as much as the sun doesn't shine every single day without rain or thunder or whatever it is, our emotional worlds are the same. So the goal isn't for you to do only things that are strength aligned and that fill your cup and you dance around the world all the time. The goal is to shift that balance towards that. And that is basically, to answer your question, the approach you might take. As in, like, I know there are certain things because I'm not in a position to delegate, or there are just certain things that I still need to keep doing, whatever it is. I know there are things. These are the things that fall into more of the bucket of like these are maybe even things I'm proficient at or things I still need to learn, but they don't like fill my cup. Great. How can I now put this on an actual scale and always make sure the scale tips into being heavier on the side of things that do energize me? And, traditionally people think about this as work-life balance, right? Where work is the drain and life is what fills you back up, kind of like. And I think that's a bit outdated, really, because especially when you're an entrepreneur, hopefully part of the reason that you do that is because it allows you to design your work in a different way. And it allows you to do things that are more aligned with your interests and your passions and the impact you want to have, etc. So hopefully it shouldn't be all of work is the drain. But of course, there are pieces within the work that are going to be draining and more challenging. And again, I'm not of the realm of like, oh, like if you love your work, then what is it? If you love what you do, you'll never work for a day in your life or something like that. And I'm not of that reality. But I do think that it's very possible and very fulfilling to shift that balance towards the strength. And so in a very natural way, once you have the awareness, you can, be like, okay, I have this like whatever admin block or organizational block that I just have to do because it has to be under my control, whatever the reason is. Okay, let me make sure that on that day where I have to do that, I have at least equal amount of time or equal amount of energy to give to something that's going to do the opposite in terms of my energy. And again, traditionally that would be a hobby or that would be life, but you can do the same in your business. You can say, oh my gosh, these are the things I enjoy much more, that like, like, I don't know, I create a piece of content and I think it's the greatest thing ever and I can get lost in that and whatever it is. Okay, great. Then build some of that into that day so that the whole day can still end at a net positive.
I really appreciate that because it's kind of something where you hear it and you think, oh, this makes sense. If I have more uplifting things and things I enjoy that give me energy than that don't. And also, like, we control our work, as you said. So there's no reason why that draining task can't go across a couple days and you bring in more stuff. I used to, because you were talking about work-life balance comparison. And when I was a fitness coach, we would do this where in the calendar, we would have color coding and it would be like light purple was revitalizing, and that was your yoga or your meditation sessions, or you're having a meal with family, and you would code that into your day. And then work would, a lot of people chose red. And work, and you would just kind of see like how visually, how does that look? But I can also see it in your work itself when you're an entrepreneur. How does that look? So the draining tasks are a different color. I mean, I already do this. Like for me, copywriting is yellow. It's not something I like. And creating and creating is bright blue. But I think that that's a really helpful piece of advice because every day is different in terms of what you have to do, but you can control the ratio of what you're doing
Mhm.
within that day.
Yeah. It's so true, right? Like, I mean, as entrepreneurs, it is often that whole idea of like how many hats we wear, right? We're the copywriter and the marketer and the creative and the whatever producer. We're all the things. And while that's often also the exciting piece about it, because you get to do all these different things and experience all these different things, if I have too many hats that day that are draining or that week, again, choose your timeline. It doesn't have to be like perfectly balanced out every single day. Like there's not, again, sometimes people take me like word for word and I'm like, no, the concept behind it is the ratio. That's what we're aiming for. And whether you measure that on the daily or on the weekly doesn't matter to me. But to just become more aware of like, this is another input I have. It's not just my time. It's also what I do in that time and how that energizes me. Because often you'll also find, right, I do maybe more strengths aligned thing. And I walk out of that and I have more inspiration and more creative energy and more things to give to whatever comes next. And that's important for me to be mindful of in order to improve, you know, my work experience, but also my work output.
That's a really big mindset shift, isn't it? That in order to gain more energy, you might technically be doing less of whatever the task was that was felt urgent or was priority or that's draining, but you actually can go to it with more energy if you are able to. It's the whole thing of like waking up early versus quality of sleep. Like you can do both, right?
Mm.
But if you're waking up at 6 a.m., but you have 3 hours of sleep, are you really getting done more in the day? And I think that that's such a big shift. So thank you for sharing that one because it's another one that kind of sparks a little bit.
I'm going to add to that one because it just came up to me as you were saying that it's the same of like the slow down to speed up, as in rest, because after that you actually speed up. And same. I mean, we were talking earlier about people maybe feeling burnt out as we're now almost 3 months or into the 3 month of the new year of like this go 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 energy where I feel like if I rest, I'm gonna stall. But really, what happens when I rest, and again, this is on the daily, on the weekly, right? No matter what time frame. What happens when I rest is actually I become more rejuvenated, which brings back more creative energy, which brings back more thing I can give, more, whether you call it the cup that's full, whatever it is, battery, it doesn't matter. But again, you don't let your iPhone run on empty. I often use the iPhone example because we all, or the phone. It's like you don't let it run on empty just because you're like, well, I still need to use it. You know, eventually, like, I'm gonna have to charge this. And so why are you different with yourself? And it's that same principle. Actually, the quality increases so much afterwards that it's worth the time away, let's say. And it's so important to anything that you do in your business, you want to be mindful of both of those things. It's time and quality, time and energy, not just time.
Some of the different ways we see success and failure, and also kind of how we operate in our business that might not be giving us the most energy, giving us the most like vitality and creativity. And I know you talk a lot about the success blockers, the things that are getting in your way, that are stopping you. If you want to share a little bit more about that, because I don't think a lot of us know or even know what questions to ask to know what those are in our lives.
I'm just going to maybe say for anyone who's not like heard me say success blocker, it's just a different way of thinking about self-sabotage, really, because that is what happens, right? When we get in our own ways. And I think that it's often more comfortable to not look there, which is also why I think, do it, right? We can get all like obsessed about details that aren't related to whether I might be avoiding a certain task or whether I might not want to show up in a certain way and all those things. It's another thing where naturally we are very much on the surface level and we've been taught that way. And this success blocker, or what I speak to there, is like what's actually holding you back is often a layer deeper. And so then we move away from this symptom experience to a what is driving those symptoms. Essentially, I would say it's like literally like diagnosing someone, except I'm not a doctor. disclaimer. but but like, the symptom might be, oh, like I just feel like I have no motivation for this, or I have no energy for this, or I keep putting this off. I can never get to it. I'm too busy. There's all these different, it's just not there yet. I need to improve it a little bit more. All these kind of sentences really that I loosely hear here a lot. And they are sort of indicators of these symptoms, but at the base of that is not just I have a tendency to procrastinate, or I have a tendency to just want to refine everything. I have just these high standards. I just want to like make everything perfect. Those are symptoms. And those are just two symptoms that I now mentioned, but those are symptoms. And what's behind that is often a belief system, is often an emotional regulation system that's not working quite well, is often, fears that are driving that. And so that's kind of what I mean in terms of like, let's take that a level deeper with success blockers versus just saying like, oh, you procrastinate. Here's the 5-minute rule for procrastination. I don't know if people have like, if it's just my world, but like, I swear it's good. And it works. Like there's a point to be made for the 5-minute rule, by the way, putting a plaster on it versus saying, hang on, what's actually driving this? And let's address that, because when we address that root, you actually end up solving a lot more of the symptoms all at once.
It's not as sexy though, so.
No, that's absolutely not sexy. And it requires you to have the hard and difficult conversations with yourself and like, to hold that mirror up to yourself and be like, what am I really doing here? And it's confronting, genuinely. And I acknowledge that and I see that. And I have so much like utmost respect for people who are willing to show up and do this work. And also I know that on the other side of that, right? Like it's often like, again, things that are challenging, things that are like, out of my comfort zone are also often the most rewarding. So I know that on the other side of that, oh, I don't want to do this, and this is challenging and confronting and unsexy. There's so much more, like the reward is so much, the payoff is multifold. And so that's why I keep harping on about it, because you can tell me all about like, I just don't get to these tasks and, have 5 different symptoms. And I'm like, well, if we solve this one thing, those other things will naturally dissolve with it.
It's interesting to think about that, because it's almost like you can do the little hack of procrastination so that today you don't procrastinate, or you can learn what's stopping you so that when it comes up again, it feels more natural to just keep going. Procrastination, that could be a whole nother episode, so I won't be going into that. But I do feel like what you're saying, it's kind of, there's so much, this is what we were talking about a little bit earlier too, about how much ego comes into it, because it feels much better for me to tell you that I'm a perfectionist and I have very high quality standards. And that's why I haven't launched my service or my product, versus for me to say like, I'm so afraid this is going to fail. I don't know what to do. I'm stressed, so I don't have the emotional regulation to work on this. That doesn't sound good to tell you as, someone who's asking about my business or who's my family or my friend. And I think you're right. We hide behind those things because they also give us almost like a validation shield from the rest of the world.
Absolutely, 100%. And again, we're also taught in those ways. And without diving into that too much now, like I often say, perfectionism is kind of the Trojan horse of self-sabotage, because it masks so much as like, oh, I have these really high standards. And, I do really great work. And so I'm just a perfectionist. But the truth is that in many cases, and again, this isn't to say you can't have high standards. This is where I actually think this is quite funny. I see this on my Instagram a lot, right? Whenever I post about perfectionism, the amount of people that get upset with me that are like, it's okay to have high standards. Like, what will become of the world when we like lose our standards? And it's not the same. Perfectionism and high standards are not the same. And it is so, so, so important to distinguish that, because what perfectionism often does is it paralyzes me. It keeps me going in these endless loops of refinement of details that nobody else would ever notice. Right? Or it even like completely like blocks me from doing anything, and it leads me to procrastinate, because deep down I feel like I can't do it perfectly anyway. And so I might not even, like, I might as well try. That's perfectionism. High standards can be, I'm going to put my work out there and I'm going to keep a really close eye on what the feedback is or what people think of it and what I can incorporate. And I'm going to improve it and iterate and keep improving it from there. And that's the way I reach the high standards. And that's often how the best solutions are made, because, I can sit on any solution, whether it's my website or a new offer I'm putting together, or even if I was, I don't know, creating a product of some sorts, like a physical, I could sit on that solution and refine it forever, and then still find that nobody wants it and nobody needs it. And it's actually not solving the problem for anyone. And so then what? Like then, yeah, I have a really high standard, but the high standard didn't correlate with what is actually helpful for someone. By and large, what we do as entrepreneurs is we offer solutions to people's problems. That is what we're doing. That is what we're in the business of, by and large. And so this idea that like, I'm now just going to do this perfectly in isolation doesn't work. It doesn't work in corporate either, but like it definitely doesn't work here. And to be like, I can still have the high standard, but the high standard can be met in multiple iterations. I can say, I want to put this to 80% of my standard, which is probably everybody else's 110% anyway, if you are a perfectionist, let's say. And then I can keep iterating and keep improving on it. And that's how I reach that really, really excellent standard.
Yeah, this idea that you actually can't reach the high standard if you don't release something first. It's how can you have the highest standard if you haven't, especially in our world, right? Like you were saying, if you're solving someone's problem, you can't possibly have perfectly hit it nail on the head that first time at that standard. You have to keep refining it. This is the end of part 2 of the series. You have one more part 3, coming next week. So make sure you show up on Monday and listen to that one. If you're catching these when they're all live, you get to go straight to them. But I really encourage, again, taking some time to implement. I'll see you in the next one.